Welcome back to AI Unraveled. Today we are mapping the New World Order. For 30 years, the internet was a flat, borderless commons. That era is over. As of 2026, we are living in the Splinternet. Your AI stack in New York is now illegal in London, blocked in Beijing, and prohibitively expensive compared to the new sovereign models rising in the East. In this episode, we are exploring digital feudalism. We'll explain the Zhipu Effect, how Chinese labs are crashing the price of intelligence by 90% and forcing a global price war. We'll look at the Silicon Cold War, where the Trump administration is taxing chips like munitions. And we'll detail the new survival strategy for every multinational CTO, Geopatriation. But first, are you drowning in dense legal text? Jamgamind is the new audio intelligence platform that turns 100-page mandates into 5-minute executive briefings. Start your specialized audio briefing today at jamgamind.com. Now let's unravel the map.
Welcome back to AI Unraveled. It is January 21st, 2026. If you are listening to this, checking your notifications or, trying to deploy code to a server halfway across the world, you have probably noticed that the ground has shifted beneath your feet.
It really has.
You're trying to navigate this digital landscape that feels, less like a superhighway and more like a minefield. The era of build once, deploy everywhere. It's dead. It's buried.
It truly is. We have officially entered the era of digital feudalism. And I want to be clear right off the top, that isn't just some scary buzzword we're throwing around for dramatic effect.
No.
It is the legal and technical reality of doing business in 2026.
Oh, it is the hard reality. We used to talk about the borderless internet with this kind of starry-eyed optimism. That sounds almost quaint now, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like looking at old photos of people smoking on airplanes. Today, it is not just about where your customers are. It is about the passport of your server.
The nationality of your GPU.
The nationality stamped on your GPU, exactly.
Yeah.
The physical zip code where your AI model actually sits.
And this isn't just a tech update or, a patch note you can ignore. This is an architectural crisis for global business. The internet's fractured. It's become this archipelago of digital islands.
Yeah.
And navigating between them requires a completely new strategy. If you are a CIO, a founder, or just someone trying to understand why your app works in Boston but completely bricks in Beijing, this is the deep dive for you.
I am A10.
And I'm Anna. We are your geopolitical tech strategists. And today, our mission is to guide you through this chaos.
We are doing a massive deep dive into this explosive new report. It's titled Sovereign AI and the Splinternet. This document, it was just released this month, and it lays it all out.
It really connects the dots.
We're going to unpack the Silicon Cold War. We're going to dissect something called the Zhipu Effect, which is absolutely destroying SaaS margins. And finally, we're going to break down the concept of geopatriation.
Which, frankly, might be the only way for your enterprise to survive this year.
So buckle up. We are going to explain why your digital passport now determines your AI capabilities and why the map of the internet looks very, very different depending on where you're standing.
Let's start with that map.
Let's do it. Because when we say Splinternet, I think a lot of listeners, they kind of tune out. We've heard the term for 10 years. But walk us through why 2026 is different. Why has this moved from a theory to a real headache?
Because it's moved from theory to operational reality. For 3 decades, we operated under this sort of tacit global consensus that protocols were universal. TCP/IP was the same everywhere.
Right.
But that consensus has just evaporated. We are seeing the rise of cyber sovereignty.
Which means what, exactly? Break that down for the non-lawyers in the room.
It's the belief that a state's borders extend vertically into the cloud. It used to be that borders stopped at the ground.
Right, at the physical border.
Now, a government claims absolute jurisdiction over data, over algorithms, and over infrastructure within its territory. So a user in Berlin, a user in Beijing, and a user in Boston are now experiencing fundamentally different internets.
So it's not the same internet with different content filtered out. It's a different animal altogether.
It's a different animal. They are governed by incompatible rules and increasingly powered by divergent technologies.
And the report has this great visual for this map of exclusion. Let's talk about the Western web versus the Eastern web, because I think people assume this is just about censorship in authoritarian regimes.
Great firewall stuff, yeah.
The stuff we've known about for years. But it's actually going both ways now, isn't it?
Precisely. That is the big shift in 2025 and 2026. Look at OpenAI's ChatGPT. It was once the avatar of global AI adoption, right?
Poster child.
Exactly. As of today, January 2026. It is blocked or unavailable in over 20 countries. China, Russia, Iran, significant parts of Africa.
Yeah.
But here is the nuance, and this is important. This isn't always government bans.
Right.
In many cases, this is defensive geo-blocking by the Western firms themselves.
Wait, so OpenAI is blocking itself. Why would they do that?
Yes. They are terrified of IP theft and liability.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you release your model in a jurisdiction where you have no legal recourse, no way to stop someone from reverse engineering it, or worse, using it to generate state-sponsored disinformation.
You're just opening yourself up to massive risk.
Massive risk. So they are proactively cutting off access. They are shrinking their own map to protect themselves.
That's fascinating. It's a preemptive retreat. You can't fire me. I quit. But then, okay, let's flip the coin. We see the war on Chinese models here in the West. I was looking at the legislative map this morning. North Dakota, Oklahoma, Alabama.
State bans.
Yeah. They aren't waiting for Washington, are they? They've eschewed outright bans on using DeepSeek, the Chinese giant, on government devices.
Citing national security concerns, yes. And at the federal level, it's the same story. The U.S. government has moved to restrict federal contractors from using any Chinese large language models. It is effectively a clean network requirement.
Right.
They're forcing a decoupling of the software supply chain.
And this puts the global south, you're thinking countries like Brazil, India, Indonesia, in a really awkward spot. They're essentially being told to pick a side.
You have to.
You're either plugging into the Western stack or the Eastern stack. You can't have both.
And that choice is becoming increasingly expensive and complex.
Yeah.
You can't just be neutral anymore. If your tech stack relies on Chinese APIs, you might lose your U.S. government contracts.
But if you rely on U.S. APIs, you might be priced out of the entire Asian market.
It's a strategic bind. And it's bind that brings us directly to the hardware, the engine room of this whole conflict.
The Silicon Cold War. And honestly, looking at the timeline, the temperature has dropped to absolute zero since the return of the Trump administration in 2025.
It really has. We went from the Biden era, which was what I would call surgical, with its entity lists, targeting specific companies, to what we are seeing now, Trump's tariff diplomacy.
It's blunt force. It's a sledgehammer.
It is. In January 2026, just this month, the White House imposed a blanket 25% tariff on all advanced computing chips. They're treating these incredibly sophisticated logic chips like taxable commodities. The report calls it silicon sovereignty.
It's just a tax on progress, essentially, a tax on the global AI economy.
Plain and simple. But I want to spend a minute on the NVIDIA roller coaster, because if you are a CIO trying to plan your compute budget, the last 12 months have been a psychological thriller.
A total whiplash. Let's trace it for the listeners because it is just absurd. So April 2025, the administration bans the export of the NVIDIA H20.
Right. And remember, the H20 was specifically designed to be compliant. It was the cut-down chip, the one they made for the Chinese market to follow the rules.
And the administration just signaled that compliance no longer guaranteed access.
Right. They essentially said, we don't care if you follow the rules just changed. But then, in July 2025, they reverse it.
They do, but with a catch.
Always a catch. They demanded a revenue share, basically a tax on any sales to China. And then, it gets crazier. In December 2025, they approved the sale of the powerful H200 to China.
The H200, that's the heavy hitter. That's the chip everyone wants for training.
It is. But the conditions were draconian. A volume cap limited to 50% of U.S. levels and a 25% government cut of the proceeds.
So the U.S. Department of Commerce has basically become a rent-seeking gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't just regulating for security. They're actively extracting value from the trade they permit.
Oh, yeah.
It's protectionism with a profit motive.
Exactly. But here is where it gets really fascinating. This is what the report calls the boomerang effect. Beijing didn't just take this lying down.
No, they didn't. This is the part of the report that really surprised me. January 2026, right now, Chinese customs officially blocked all imports of the NVIDIA H200. They rejected the U.S. offer.
It is a massive strategic pivot.
Mm-hmm.
They are forcing their own tech giants. We're talking Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, to abandon the NVIDIA CDA ecosystem.
Which is the industry standard.
It is the standard. And they are forcing them to switch to domestic alternatives like Huawei's Ascend series and more threads.
So it's a strategic decoupling. I mean, that's got to be painful in the short term, right?
Yeah.
Rewriting your entire code base from CDA to Huawei's Canon software. That's a nightmare for developers.
Oh, a total nightmare. But in the long term,
You could make them independent.
it is creating a divergent species of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the great unintended consequence of the American blockade. By denying China raw compute power, the H100s, the Blackwells, the U.S. has forced Chinese labs to innovate in one specific area, efficiency.
They couldn't brute force it anymore.
No. In the West, we have this habit. If we want a smarter model, we just make it bigger. We throw more parameters at it. We throw 10,000 more GPUs at it and hope for the best. China didn't have that luxury. So they had to get smarter. They developed these novel architectures, things like multi-head latent attention or MLA and mixture of experts.
Okay, stop there. We hear mixture of experts thrown around a lot. Break that down for us. Why does that specifically solve the chip shortage?
Think of it this way. A traditional dense model, like the early GPTs, is like one giant genius librarian who has memorized every single book in the library.
Okay.
Every time you ask a question, even a simple one, you have to wake up that entire massive brain. It takes a huge amount of energy and compute.
So every query uses the whole model.
Every single one. Mixture of experts, or MOE, is different. Instead of one genius, you have a team of specialists. One is an expert on history, one knows Python code, one specializes in French poetry.
I see where this is going.
When you send a prompt, there's a little router at the front that looks at your question and says, this is a coding question. Let's send it to the Python expert.
So you aren't activating the whole brain.
Exactly. You are only activating a tiny fraction of the model's parameters for any given token. This drastically reduces the computational cost while allowing the total knowledge base to remain huge. This is how China is achieving state-of-the-art results on a fraction of the compute budget.
So the blockade that was aimed at slowing them down actually forced them to become leaner, meaner, and more efficient.
That's the boomerang. Now, of course, there is still a smuggler's premium. There is a sophisticated gray market in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, keeping some of the chip flow alive, but the prices are hugely inflated. Structurally, though, the East has learned to do more with less, and that efficiency is dangerous to underestimate.
Which brings us to the inevitable economic fallout. This is what the report calls the Zhipu Effect.
This is the economics of intelligence. And honestly, if you were in the SaaS business, if you were building software on top of AI, this section should terrify you.
Let's look at the numbers because they're stark. We're talking about the complete collapse of inference pricing. 2023, 2024, those were the high margin days.
The good old days.
You could wrap GPT-4, charge $20 a month, and, buy a boat.
Intelligence was scarce, and scarcity drives price. But look at January 2026. The Chinese firms, especially DeepSeek and Zhipu AI, have driven API prices down by 90% compared to their Western counterparts.
90%. I want to make sure the listeners hear that figure.
Okay.
Give us the direct comparison.
Okay, let's take OpenAI's GPT-4o, which is still a workhorse. You are looking at roughly $2.50 per million input tokens and $10 for output.
Okay, standard pricing.
Now look at Zhipu's latest model, GLM 4.5. It's 40 cents for input, $1.60 for output. That is an 84% discount.
84%. And DeepSeek?
DeepSeek V3 is even lower, 27 cents for input, $1.10 for output. That's an 89% discount.
That's nearly an order of magnitude cheaper. Now, the official U.S. political view is that this is dumping, that it's predatory pricing subsidized by the state to kill Western competition.
And there is likely some truth to that. State subsidies are definitely part of the picture. We can't ignore that.
But it's not the whole story.
It is not the whole story. We cannot ignore the technical reality we just discussed. We call it frugal AI. DeepSeek actually disclosed that the training cost for their V3 model was only about $5.5 million.
$5.5 million.
Compare that to the estimated $100 million plus for comparable Western models.
That is the efficiency payoff we were talking about. They aren't just subsidizing the price, they genuinely built it cheaper from the ground up.
Exactly. So what does this mean for Western SaaS? If the cost of thought goes to zero, those high-margin subscription models are in serious danger.
Well, let's play that out. If I'm a startup founder and I've built my entire business model on, say, summarizing emails or extracting data from PDFs.
You are in trouble because your competitor can come along, use the Chinese stack, and have a 90% cost advantage on day one. It's an insurmountable economic gap.
So it forces a market bifurcation. We are seeing two distinct tiers emerge.
Yes. First, you have the commodity tier. This is for high-volume, low-risk task summarization, coding assistance, data scraping. The economic gravity is just pulling those tasks to the Chinese models because the price difference is too massive to ignore.
You can't justify paying 10 times more for a summary of a Zoom meeting.
You just can't. But you also can't just send everything to China.
No, of course not.
And that's the second tier, the sovereign tier. This is for your sensitive, regulated, high-liability tasks. Legal analysis, medical diagnosis, defense strategy. Those stay with Western providers, OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic.
Right?
But, and this is the key, you are paying a premium for trust and for compliance, not necessarily for better intelligence.
You are paying for the passport of the model. You're paying for the assurance that your data isn't landing on a server in Hangzhou.
Precisely. Western AI is becoming a luxury good, while Eastern AI is becoming the utility.
Okay, so we have the West, we have the East. But the world isn't just two sides. There is a third player entering this game with very, very deep pockets. The third pole.
The Gulf states, specifically Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they are flush with capital, and they are moving beyond oil at an incredible speed. They see the writing on the wall, and they are building a state-directed AI industrial policy.
Let's talk about Saudi Arabia first. They have Project Transcendence. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but the money is very real.
$100 billion in investment. And this isn't venture capital money. This is nation building. They are building massive infrastructure with Aramco's MetaBrain initiative at the center.
MetaBrain.
It's a sovereign data processing initiative. They want to ensure that the kingdom's data is processed by indigenous intelligence on their own soil.
And then the UAE has the Falcon strategy, which I find fascinating because they are taking a very different route than either the US or China.
It's very clever. They are releasing powerful open weights models like Falcon 180B to challenge the US closed source dominance. It's a soft power play. They are effectively saying to the global south, look, the Americans want you to pay rent for their black box. The Chinese want your data. Here is high-quality AI, free of charge, with no strings attached. It makes them an attractive partner.
And they are hedging their bets, aren't they? They're partnering with Microsoft and IBM, but they're keeping the door open to Chinese hardware.
Absolutely. If U.S. export controls get too tight, they have a backup plan. They are positioning themselves as the Switzerland of AI, but a Switzerland armed with racks of H100s.
Now, we can't talk about the Splinternet without talking about the content itself, because late 2025 saw the content fortress really rise up, and the catalyst, surprise, surprise, was Elon Musk's X and its model, Grok.
It was. The explosion of deepfakes on X in late 2025 was the absolute tipping point. Grok's guardrails were, let's just say, optimistic. We saw a flood of non-consensual intimate imagery and political deepfakes being generated by the model at scale.
And the global backlash was immediate.
Instant and severe. The UK invoked its Online Safety Act, threatening to block X entirely. The EU used the Digital Services Act to order discovery of Grok's training data, which is a huge move.
But look at Asia. Indonesia and Malaysia implemented hard blocks on Grok itself.
That was a first, wasn't it? Blocking a specific model, not the whole platform.
Yeah.
And it shows that governments are learning how to target the specific AI engine rather than just the website hosting it. It's a surgical strike against the model itself.
So now we have this complete regulatory divergence. The EU AI Act is in full enforcement in 2026.
Which means mandatory watermarking, deepfake disclosure rules, fines up to 7% of your global turnover. It's a fortress. If you want to do business in Europe, you play by rules that simply do not exist in Texas.
And speaking of confused regulations, there is my home country, Canada. We are in a bit of a gridlock, aren't we?
A bit of a mess, frankly. The failure of the federal bill C-27 left Canada in this policy limbo. So what happened? Quebec stepped in. Quebec's Law 25 has become the de facto national standard because it is stricter than any proposed federal law.
It's the Brussels effect, but happening within Canada.
Exactly. Companies can't easily segregate their Quebec operations, so they just apply Law 25 nationally, and this is driving what the report calls hard localization and Canada-first data strategies. If you're a Canadian bank, you are not sending your customer data south of the border anymore, if you can possibly help it.
Okay. We've painted a picture of a fractured, dangerous world. Tariffs, bans, deepfakes, splintered regulations. The global village is on fire. If I am a CTO of a multinational corporation listening to this, what do I do? How do I build an architecture that survives this?
You have to stop pretending the internet is flat. It's not. You have to embrace the new architecture, and that architecture is geopatriation.
Geopatriation. Break that down for us. That sounds like a buzzword, but I know there's a serious technical definition behind it.
It is the necessity to fracture your global systems into localized sovereign entities. It is based on a core principle, computational sovereignty.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay. Imagine you are a German automotive company. You have a user in Frankfurt. If that user's data is processed by an AI model running on a server in Virginia, That is a data transfer. The processing is the transfer.
Okay, that's a critical distinction.
It is. So under strict sovereignty laws like GDPR, that's a liability. The model itself must reside physically in Germany, or at least within the EU.
So you can't just have one API endpoint anymore. You can't just call api.openai.com and be done with it.
No, that is suicide in 2026. You need an AI gateway. Think of it as the customs officer for your enterprise's digital traffic.
How does that work in practice? Walk me through a request.
Okay, visualize the stack. You have this gateway layer sitting between your users and all the different AI models. A user in Frankfurt sends a prompt. Summarize this engineering contract. The gateway sees the IP address. It sees the jurisdiction is EU. It sees the payload contains sensitive legal data. It automatically routes that request specifically to Mistral Large, running in a Paris sovereign cloud.
So the data never leaves the European Union?
Never. Now, a user in New York sends a prompt. The gateway sees that and routes it to GPT-5 on Azure US East.
And a user in China?
The gateway identifies the origin. It routes it to Qwen 2.5 on Alibaba Cloud. Or, depending on your internal compliance policy, it blocks the request entirely.
So the gateway is handling all of that compliance logic dynamically. It's like a traffic cop who knows the laws of every country on Earth.
Exactly. And it's doing more than just routing. It's doing PII redaction, stripping sensitive info like names and addresses before the data leaves your secure enclave. And allows for model arbitrage.
That goes back to the Zhipu Effect.
Yes. This is where you save your margins. This is critical. You can program the gateway to analyze the difficulty of the prompt. Is it a simple coding question?
Send it to the cheap guys.
Route it to DeepSeek or a quantized Llama 3 model. It costs pennies. But is it a complex, strategic reasoning task that requires nuance?
Send that to the PhD model.
Route that to GPT-5 or Claude 4. You are optimizing for cost and compliance simultaneously. You get the best price for the easy stuff and the best brain for the hard stuff, all automatically.
And for the really, really sensitive stuff, defense, finance, proprietary chemical formulas.
The air gap is back. Sovereign cloud. Companies are deploying models entirely on-prem, physically disconnected from the internet. IBM's Sovereign Core and Oracle's Alloy are big enablers here. It sounds retro, but it's the only way to be 100% sure your secrets stay secret.
So let's bring it all home. The World Wide Web is history. We need to stop mourning it and start building for what's next.
It is. Long live the Splinternet. The chip wars didn't stop China. They just created a leaner, divergent species of AI. The Zhipu Effect made intelligence cheap, but the Splinternet made applying that intelligence expensive and complex.
So the goal for an enterprise is no longer to build a single global brain.
No, that's an obsolete concept. The goal is to orchestrate a federated mesh of sovereign brains. Cheap Chinese inference where you can legally and safely use it, compliant European data stores where you absolutely must use them, and American innovation where you need the cutting edge.
It's a complex puzzle. It requires legal, technical, and strategic coordination like I've never seen before.
It does. But here is the final thought I want to leave our listeners with.
Yeah.
In a world where your digital passport determines your AI capabilities, do you know where your data is actually sleeping tonight?
Wow.
Because if you don't, you can be sure that someone else definitely does.
That is a terrifying thought to end on, but a necessary one. Thank you for listening to this deep dive on AI Unraveled. Good luck out there in the Splinternet. We will catch you on the next one.
That wraps up our deep dive into sovereign AI. The signal for today is geopatriation. The days of build once, deploy everywhere are gone. The winners of 2026 will be the autonomous enterprises that treat data compliance not as a legal checklist, but as a software architecture problem. If you aren't routing your AI traffic like you route your currency, locally and compliantly, you are already exposed. Before we go, a reminder for the leaders listening. Are you drowning in dense legal text? JamgaMind is the new audio intelligence platform that decodes liability so you don't have to. Start your specialized audio briefing today at jamgamind.com. This podcast is created and produced by Etienne Noumen. Please subscribe and share. Until next time, keep unraveling the future.